in general, I think sort of the overall sort of narrative today is more sort of backlash, and you read it from the news. But when you look under the hood a bit, and also what sort of companies are doing, and so most are actually not stepping back, but things are proceeding. So I think there is a misperception between the news headlines and what's actually happening when you look under the hood.
Welcome to The Sustainable Edge, your podcast that moves sustainability beyond talk. You get to hear sharp perspectives and leave with insights you can put into action. I'm your host, Joachim Nahum, and this podcast is produced by Position Green.
When we talk about the green transition, energy is where everything begins, and it's often where things get most complicated. Behind every sustainability ambition, every electrical vehicle, every data center or factory striving to decarbonize, there's a fundamental question. Where does the clean power come from, and how do we ensure there's enough of it? In the Nordics, we like to think we've already solved this. We're proud of our hydropower, our growing wind capacity, and the role nuclear has played in delivering stable, low-carbon electricity. But the reality is more complex. Even if our local production is clean, we're part of a larger European grid, which means what flows through our sockets is often a blend of clean energy and residual sources like coal or gas from neighboring countries. There's also a more concerning global backdrop. Many of the news headlines about renewables are negative. Oil and gas players are deprioritizing or even scrapping renewable energy projects. Some governments are rolling back supportive policies, or like the Trump administration, blocking clean energy initiatives. Yet when you dig into the data, from Texas to Europe, you uncover a more positive story. Today, I'm speaking with Fortum, a leading Nordic energy company listed on the Nasdaq Helsinki exchange, currently with a market cap of about 16 billion euro. Fortum sits right at the heart of the energy challenge, helping industries transition through electrification and trying to embed sustainability not just as a goal, but as a core part of business. Today, I'm very pleased to be joined by Tomas Qvickström, who is the Vice President of Corporate Sustainability at Fortum. He's going to help us unpack what the real energy transition looks like, the trade-offs, the innovations, and what the data, not the perceptions, are telling us. Tomas, welcome to Sustainable Edge.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Great to have you. So, Fortum, I gave a quick introduction, but your mission is enabling a clean energy future. How do you define that in practice?
So if I start to give a bit of a background and context. So Fortum's purpose is really to power a world where people, businesses, and nature thrive together. And our strategy is designed to deliver this purpose. So our main strategic priorities, they are to first deliver reliable clean energy, and second, drive decarbonization in industries. So we deliver this clean or low carbon electricity with mainly hydro, nuclear, wind power. And in 2024, our power production was around 47 terawatt hours. So we were the third largest electricity production company in the Nordics. Of this, 99% already was from low carbon production sources. We also deliver district heating in Finland and in Poland. And in total, we have over 2.4 million customers. So we are the largest electricity retail sales company in the Nordics. Related to our other strategic priority, we drive decarbonization in industries by, for example, developing sites for data centers industries that shorten the lead time for permitting and construction. We provide innovative solutions, for example, our data center collaboration with Microsoft in Espoo, where we are using excess heat from the data center they are building to provide low carbon heat to the city of Espoo, by also using electric boiler storage to increase the flexibility. And then we have an 8 gigawatt pipeline of onshore wind and solar projects in the permitting phase across the Nordic countries, basically have the readiness to meet the power needs of industrial investments once they emerge.
And how much of the energy that you provide or facilitate is for private consumers versus businesses? Roughly, since you're doing, data centers are mainly for businesses, well, you said heating in Poland and Finland, as I understood. You do both, right? In terms of private households and businesses, you provide energy.
Yes, and here, of course, it's important to understand how the electricity markets work. So, I mean, we produce electricity. We can either sell that directly to our industrial customers, or we can sell it to the electricity market or the electricity through the electricity exchange. And we are, of course, also able to buy from the electricity exchange to then sell that forward to our customers. So I cannot give an exact figure on sort of how much
it ends up.
Production. Yes.
But what would you say has changed the most over the past 5 years? When we talk about clean energy, you mentioned data centers. Obviously, this has increased in terms of the demand for data centers. They're being built different places. But what would you say has changed the most over the past few years?
I would say that due to the current geopolitical uncertainty, for example, the decarbonization imperative, it's still there. But especially for big industrial investments, the pace is slower than anticipated. And I think also the language has changed. So topics like resilience and security of supply are more urgent in today's world, but these are not contradictory to, for example, reducing emissions, as building new low-carbon power that will also lower the dependency on fossil fuels. So they go hand in hand.
And on that note, in terms of geopolitical security or insecurity, there is a public debate that's suggesting Europe is falling back on fossil fuels, meaning that we're relying more on in particular, gas, and gas delivery has become very important from a geopolitical security perspective. But what does both your perspective and the data tell us about the direction of this energy mix? Is it true? Are we falling more back on fossil fuels, or what does the data tell us?
So here, if you look at of course, new electricity production, solar and wind power, they are already the cheapest forms to build, both in the Nordics and in Europe. Fossil fuel plants, again, coal, gas, fired power, I mean, they are also more expensive to run, so you have much higher OPEX cost. Few would build any new ones today. However, from a security of supply point of view, also firm power, which you can decide when to run, that's needed to keep the electricity system stable. And this can, in some countries, of course, set limitations for how quickly fossil fuel plants can be phased out or shut down. Then it's also good to remember that there are huge differences in Europe. So, I mean, the situation, it looks very different in Norway or France versus in Poland and Germany. And this is due to both different energy infrastructure and then different political choices made over the last decades. So, for example, many European countries, a lot of fossil gas is used for heating homes. And that, of course, takes time to change, as you need to change the whole infrastructure as well. But that said, of course, there's a need for Europe to then reduce the dependency on fossil fuel supplies and also external supply chain from both the climate and resilience reasons.
So if I understand you correctly, from a business perspective, if you're looking to reduce emissions, it's not just about the energy supply or your use of energy. It's obviously the efficiency there in terms of your facilities or infrastructure, in terms of energy intensity, things that you can do, whether it's a household actually or a business for that matter, in terms of the use of energy, not just the source.
Yeah, that's both.
From a decarbonization perspective.
From a decarbonization point of view, yes, you are correct.
And I heard you also saying that the pace of renewable projects or large investments is, compared to a few years back, is less. Is that, what do you think the reason for that is? You mentioned security, maybe some other factors. Why are we seeing less investment in large renewable projects in the Nordics in particular? If I understood you correctly.
Yeah. So I mean, of course, if you think about big industrial decarbonization projects, I mean, then you can be either sort of course, decarbonizing industry or then sort of building new power production. I mean, these are big investments, and like with any big investments, you would need to de-risk them, both to manage the risk, but also to lower the cost of capital. And to de-risk the project, you usually need a reasonable long offtake agreement. So thinking about usually the technology, that's in most cases there also for industrial. I mean, making low carbon steel, e-methanol, etc., using low carbon hydrogen. But to make the de-risking, you will need an offtake agreement, and this is sometimes a bottleneck. So how to get sufficient certainty, committed offtake at competitive enough prices compared to traditional alternatives. And when the ball gets sort of rolling, I think human beings are smart, and when the volume increase, we usually see the scale effects that reduce the cost of production, what we have seen with solar and wind power and also with batteries. So eventually also low carbon alternatives will be competitive, but need to get started to get the snowball rolling.
So Tomas, you've described the Nordic plate model for energy, which essentially combines flexible, firm, and renewable sources. Can you explain in layman terms, simple terms, why the balance matters between these energy sources?
Yeah. So first, it's of course important to have renewable energy sources as much as possible, and wind and solar, they are relatively fast to build, even if the permitting may take some time. However, the challenge is that they are particularly weather and seasonal dependent. So on top of that, you would need a source of energy that's reliably available 24/7, 365 days per year to also cover the base load. And this would be something like, for example, nuclear, which provides stable and firm power. Then hydropower, again, that's a good example of mostly flexible power. So hydropower is easy to often to ramp up and down, and compared to, for example, batteries in places where you have water storage, you can run those for longer time than a couple of hours before needing to recharge them or fill up the dam again. So for the electricity system to work well, you would need a balanced system of flexible, firm, and renewable power. And this we call the dinner plate model, as an analogy what you have been taught how to basically eat healthy with a balanced combination of both carbohydrates, protein, and fat.
And is it this diet or lack of balancing that went wrong in Spain when we had the power outage? And maybe the verdict is still out on that, but it sounds like this sort of backup and balancing is important to avoid outages like we saw in Spain.
Yes, I think the verdict, as you said, is still out on that. But of course, if you sort of would only have solar and wind power, then you would have then either you would need to have so much of it to cover also the minimum load when it's sort of not sun is not shining or wind is not blowing, so it would be too expensive. Or you would need something else to complement it. That would actually be the most cost-efficient electricity system.
So as I understand, then it's a question of having renewable backups. It's not necessarily that you have to then have more oil or gas or coal, non-renewables. It's the type of renewables you have and how you have sort of security within different stable renewables and not over-reliance on one renewable source.
No, and I mean, then here also nuclear plays a role because it's about low carbon power, no emissions from it, and it's sort of stable and firm. And then, of course, flexible, also low carbon power, like, for example, hydro.
Yep. And what are the biggest bottlenecks you face when it comes to increasing renewable production? Is it the technology? Is it the permitting? Or is it the complexity of economics of large-scale clean projects? Or all of the above?
Yeah. So if you think about the decarbonization in general and needed industry investments to decrease emissions and what's slowing it down, I think it consists of several parts. So the technology, that's in most cases already there. So, I mean, there is technology for how to make low-carbon steel, e-methanol, ammonia, etc. And for example, using low carbon hydrogen. Permitting, especially for a new power production, that is sometimes a bottleneck. So governments in Finland, Sweden, and Norway, I mean, they are working on this to simplify that. But if we look at the big industrial decarbonization projects, these are usually huge investments. And like with most investment, then you need to de-risk them and to both manage the risk, but also lower the cost of capital. And for those, you would need reasonably long offtake agreements. And I think these offtake agreements can be sometimes a bottleneck today. So how to really get sufficient certainty and committed offtake and competitive enough prices compared to traditional alternatives. And sort of to get that starting, to get the volume and scale effects and reduce the cost of production and get that snowball rolling.
If we talk about energy production and electricity, renewables, you mentioned wind, solar, hydro. There's also nuclear. And in the Nordics, it's a little bit different. As you mentioned there, the components of renewables is different across Finland, Denmark, Norway, and Sweden. Nuclear is kind of increasing both in debates and I guess as an energy source, but it's still, it's more Finland and Sweden and not really in Denmark and Norway. Where do you think nuclear will be in 5 or 10 years as a source, specifically in the Nordics, but maybe beyond as well? Where are we moving with nuclear? What's your opinion?
Yeah, nuclear is a really good example of firm and low carbon power. So it provides stable base load. It's an important part of a functioning low carbon electricity system. And it also helps to keep the electricity grid stable in case of sudden outages of other power plants. So really, the nuclear is an essential piece of the decarbonization journey and the energy transition. But all low carbon power, also nuclear, will really be needed to decarbonize society and industries. Then, of course, we know that it's a long time to basically permit and construct a nuclear power plant. So that is something that it will not sort of come within a couple of years, but there are sort of long lead times for it.
Yeah, so it's not just a technology question. I guess it's also political in terms of policy decisions to go ahead, especially in countries where nuclear has not been part of their energy production. As I mentioned, both Denmark and Norway does not really have nuclear, while Finland, I guess, is the most prominent, and then Sweden.
Yeah.
There are similar discussions across Europe in terms of, where you have France and UK that have a history of nuclear energy production, while others do not for various reasons. But do you think this is going to play a more important role moving forward in terms of its share of renewables?
Well, we are at least seeing a sort of also shift in the mindset of that. So, compared to how it was like 5 or 10 years ago, there is much more sort of positive views in also countries that do not have nuclear and so looking at it. So, but that said, of course, this is, even if there would be a decision to build a new nuclear plant, it's something that takes a long time to do. It will not come fast.
Yes. And let's talk a little bit about Fortum's own sustainability work. I mentioned, you are at least by Nordic standards, a sizable company with a 16 billion euro market cap. And you have set sustainability targets yourself across sort of material topics for a company like yours on climate, biodiversity, and finance. How do you, because you're also, as I understand, responsible for the work you do at the corporate level for sustainability, how do you make sure that these targets are embedded in real business decisions and not just sort of ESG reporting silos where we just report on sustainability for the sake of sustainability, but where they actually have an impact on the business?
Yeah, we have really taken the approach to integrate what we do into the existing relevant core management processes. So what we've done is basically that we break down the targets to what is relevant for each business. and together with them define sort of the target level, what are the actions that needed to reach that, as well as, of course, the potential cost to implement the actions. The actions are then embedded into the business plans, and the progress follows part of the normal performance management process, similar like for financial numbers. And then the actual reporting or disclosure at the end of the year, it's then more simply the residual of what we are doing throughout the year.
And I believe you've even taken this to the market, so to speak, because you have sustainability-linked financing, where essentially your debt is tied to some of these targets. Can you explain to us what these targets are? Sort of just give us some examples. What are you trying to achieve? What are the targets?
You mean related to sustainable finance, or related to sort of overall sustainability?
I guess both, because if I understand correctly, you have your strategy, you have your targets, you're saying, here's what we're going to do, here's our baseline, here's our target, here's what it will cost, here's what we get out. And if I understand you, you've tied this also to a debt instrument or to sustainability-linked financing, where you're telling the market, this is what we're going to achieve. And they're essentially investing in that strategy and in these targets. So I'm just curious, or for our listeners, I think would be interested to know, what are examples? Is it sort of your own emissions that you're reducing? Is it biodiversity impact that you're measuring and showing that you're keeping to a bare minimum? What are some concrete examples of these targets?
Yeah. So basically, of course, we have defined sort of what sustainability related topics are essential for, or sort of most material, most important for us as a company. So then, climate is a good example. For climate, then we have set the science-based climate targets. We have a climate transition plans, and we are, of course, following that and reporting the progress on it. Biodiversity is another material or important area. So then we have set targets related to that and broken those down to basically sort of land use and impact from climate and impact on land use following that.
And land use is because it can be, some energy production can be land intensive in terms of on-land solar, for example, or hydro. Is that sort of, those are drivers of land?
Well, for our, so basically sort of the terrestrial biodiversity impact from Fortum's point of view, majority actually comes from sort of climate-related pressure or impact. But then the second biggest part is related to land use when we are building new solar and wind power plants. So then we are basically looking how to avoid or mitigate for that, or in the end compensate if we would need to do that.
Yep. And this is then backed by investors in the debt market who are essentially supporting or investing in your strategy, if I understand.
Yeah, of course, one part is sort of equity investors sort of investing in the strategy. Of course, if we link it to then financing, the green finance framework we have defined that's linked to the taxonomy of our assets. So there you can do that in several different ways, and we have chosen the taxonomy. So meaning that we have certain criteria for how to do that we have sort of defined. And
but there you could, for example, issue a bond, or have a loan that's tied to some of these sustainability targets and outcomes.
Yes.
And if we talk about how you can help customers, because obviously your biggest impact, it's important what you do yourself in terms of be it nature or climate, but the impact you have via customers is obviously much larger. So if we think of electricity, can that provide a bigger help in helping customers track and reduce their carbon footprint, or essentially can a power bill become a mini carbon report, especially for what we call then scope 2, the use of energy, which is an important part of emissions for businesses and your customers. Tell us a little bit about that. How can you help them decarbonize?
Yeah. So when it comes to electricity that is purchased, every customer, of course, has the choice to buy low carbon electricity. That's something we offer, something I would naturally recommend everybody to sort of buy and make sure they buy that. And by doing that, you can ensure that you power your everyday life in a sustainable way. And in addition, what we talked about earlier, of course, we can help in play a role in helping consumers how to use electricity more efficiently, which is something we work a lot with. And then also, providing smart solutions, for example, for how to charge electric vehicles, to sort of charge them when the price is lower. For our business customers, we, in addition to choosing or offering low carbon electricity, also offer a service that help them to verify and report the origin of that, which is, of course, both supporting the sustainable reporting, but also the carbon tracking part.
And on the origin part here, this is the equivalent of that when businesses use energy, most businesses do, whether it's an office or a production site, or through a fleet of vehicles or whatever they own. The assumption sometimes is if you plug into the wall or the socket here, the energy you're getting out is green. So for example, in Norway, pretty much all energy production is green. It's hydropower, but because it belongs to a grid, and unless you have a source of origin, the residual here could be dirty. So meaning you need something more than just to sort of plug the cord into the socket. You need some kind of origin here or certification. Is that correct? For it to be properly green, or for you to get credit for it being green, the energy?
Yes. So these are basically, the guarantees of origin, or let's say that if you take one step back. So one of the most effective ways, basically, for customers to reduce the carbon footprint is by these guarantees of origin, that they track the electricity one purchase back to the electricity production from fossil-free sources. And these guarantees of origin, they are EU's official labeling scheme for electricity. They are intended to really stimulate investment in energy production from renewable energy sources, and through that contribute to increased development of electricity production with low CO2 emissions. So purchasing these together with the electricity contract, that's a way for both consumer and business customers to really contribute towards faster energy transition, where fossil fuels are then phased out and replaced with renewable and fossil-free resources. And even in a sort of country like Norway that you said, almost all electricity production is from renewable sources, but that doesn't mean that all of the final consumption would be fossil-free. So if consumers or businesses in Europe are buying the guarantees of origin from fossil-free production, for example, from Norway, and this can be done in an integrated European market, that's how it works, it means that your final consumption is not, as said, necessarily 100% fossil-free, unless you yourself actively make that choice.
Exactly, because it could be coal in Poland or Germany if they've bought it there, but the energy production is coming from that source. But if I hear you correctly, there's sort of two possibilities here for businesses, or what you encourage them to do is, one, to ensure that a guarantee of origin, so that their energy usage is actually green, and there may be a cost, or there usually is a cost in getting that guarantee. So that's one. And the other is optimization, or sort of energy efficiency. So you help them in the market to see ways they can, if not reduce necessarily just the energy usage, but the price. I guess the same principle of charging your car at night for consumers or households, it would be similar for business. There are ways to optimize your energy use and then bring down the cost. I would think that's also an important part of your value offering to customers.
Yeah, and that's, of course, in the end, very much depending on the customer and what's possible, and sort of the willingness to do that as well. So it really depends on the customer type.
And you spent, many years in this space on renewables and advising or working at a company that helps businesses with the green transition. But if you were going to take give our listeners one takeaway on how to turn sustainability ambition, because there's enough ambition out there, but if we turn it into real world impact, what would it be? What's your number one piece of advice?
In a business context, I think the recipe would be quite general. So taking a fact-based approach, defining clear targets while understanding the biggest levers and related costs related to it, defining actions together with businesses or stakeholders and integrating this into the normal processes. Then again, from the individual perspective, I think it's about the everyday choices that we do. So consumers do drive demand, both for sustainable and not sustainable products. And this is a choice we can make every day, and it has impact.
Yeah. And do you have some examples? Like, what are some of the choices that you've personally made or that you think listeners can do to reduce on that everyday basis?
Well, the no-brainer, of course, and what I do myself is to ensure that I buy low carbon electricity. That's very easy.
With origins of guarantee.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good. And in terms of where we're heading, are you optimistic? Do you see I started the episode by referring to perception versus data. That it's easily just have this perception, negative perception that things are going the wrong way and that we're falling back on fossil fuels. And most of the headlines when it comes to renewables are negative, but yet the data is showing something else. I mean, there's pretty positive data to be read on whether it's European energy production. I believe solar now is a much larger part of the energy mix than it was 5, 10, 15 years ago. Texas, which I alluded to, has now more clean energy production than dirty energy production, which I think is completely contrary to public or popular perception. So do you feel we're sort of that's a lot of negative headlines, but that the trend, the sort of scientific and data trend, is actually positive when it comes to renewables?
Yes, it certainly is. I mean, that you see, I mean, as you said yourself, in Texas, something that you would sort of link to oil. I mean, it's happening because it's simply cheapest. So, I mean, the economic imperative is there. And in general, I think sort of the overall sort of narrative today is more sort of backlash, and you read it from the news. But when you look under the hood a bit, and also what sort of companies are doing, and so most are actually not stepping back, but things are proceeding. So I think there is a misperception between what the news headlines and what's actually happening when you look under the hood.
And you mentioned cost. You know, the number one driver here for doing renewables is also a cost decision. It's not necessarily a moral decision. It's as a business, it's a cost decision. And when it comes to Texas, for example, I know one of the reasons why the clean energy production is increasing, it's also making money. So the landowners, again, solar or wind turbines, there are a lot of landowners in Texas who can make a good buck off of using their land for this type of production. So it's not necessarily a policy statement or an ethical decision. It's an economic one. So they make money, and companies can save money by using renewables. And that's what's driving this progress, perhaps more than 5 or 10 years ago, where there was a little bit more of a moral stance that needed to be taken in terms of getting this going. But in that way, I guess we've succeeded with part of the energy transition, because it's an economic, it's a self-interest decision.
Yeah, and that we are seeing, I mean, that is happening for solar and wind. It's happening for I mean, battery storage systems, because, I mean, the cost of those have come down so much. So, I mean, it's they are economically viable. I mean, thinking about the industrial electrification and the industrial decarbonization, but there we still need to get that ball rolling and things to get the scale effects and costs to come down.
Tomas Qvickström from Fortum, thank you so much for joining us on Sustainable Edge today. On behalf of myself and our listeners, I can say we are certainly more knowledgeable about the energy transition. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
That's it for this episode of Sustainable Edge. If you found today's conversation inspiring, make sure to subscribe and leave us a review. It helps more sustainability leaders find us.